A special shout out to the YouTuber Stranger Gamers. Stay tuned after tonight's story to be able to hear a story from Stranger Gamers that he's sponsored via Patreon. When I joined the case at 47 County Street, I didn't know what to expect. As a social worker, I see all kinds of screwed up things from child abuse to children abusing their parents, yet when I get the reports from County Street, I wasn't expecting much. The initial letters we received from a neighbor describing loud noises, shouting in the late hours of the night, and a teenager storming off from the household on a bike last winter, just after the sound of glass shattering from inside the house. This apparently had been going on for a few years. Still, something about the way the cop came in on Tuesday, white as a sheet, asking about the case, probably should have at least somewhat set off an alarm. I was ignorant. There I was, in the living room of the Bedford family home on County Street, beside myself as the story unfolded. Dan, the father of 3 children, spoke first with tears in his eyes. "I'm so glad somebody called on us. My wife and I would have never had the courage to contact anyone about this." This struck me as odd, seeing as most people don't want the authorities or social services knocking at their door. "Can I offer you some water? Coffee, maybe?" That's what Valerie, Dan's wife, asked me in a hushed voice. They both looked exhausted and abashed, like they'd been stranded on an island for weeks and were just rescued by me. They seemed indifferent to their surroundings, calm at the moment, but the tension was kinetic. "No, thank you." I passed up the offer. I wasn't comfortable accepting anything from the couple just yet. "Tell me, as we need to get started here, what are your children's names? How old are they?" I already had this info, but I needed to survey how these two react to questioning. Valerie answered me. "Well, Damien's 17. He dropped out of school last week, but he's not here today. And there's my little sweetheart, Kelsey. She's 11. She's with her grandmother for the weekend." "It's Wednesday, ma'am." "Oh, right, I'm sorry. She's with her auntie. I lose track, since they're never here anymore. She'll be home soon, though." Her husband stared at her intently, almost not staring at her at all. More like through her. I took note of this. "I'm sorry, I just remember that you're being recorded for this interview. I apologize if I'm mistaken, but I have on file here that you have a 3rd child." They both stared coolly into my eyes. A chill ran up my spine, my left leg went numb. This is a feeling I would get as a child if I ever made a joke that offended someone. Except now, 34, suddenly felt out of place. "Jessica," they both spoke in unison. I relaxed slightly. "Jessica, okay, yes, I have that here. 7 years old?" They nodded together, their faces twisted into an uncomfortable expression, both slightly wringing their hands. Dan glanced over at the staircase to his left, I guess to silently signal as to Jessica's whereabouts. "She's up there," Valerie told me, suddenly sobbing. A pang hit my heart like knuckles to a tetherball. I could feel my emotions swinging around my ribs, my stomach starting to turn. "Excellent. Can I meet her?" I stiffly asked. "Yes, but..." Valerie wiped her nose with a tissue and looked at the stairs. "But you have to go get her." Another odd feeling. I was beginning to get suspicious, but I wasn't sure as to what I was getting suspicious of. These two seemed like a train wreck, and I'm certainly here to judge. Still, they didn't seem like bad people. They felt like victims to me. I decided to accept their request. "Okay, where upstairs is she? In her room?" I scratched to the back of my neck, as I do when I'm not comfortable. "Yeah," they both answered at the same time. I stared at both of them for a bit, before standing up and heading towards the stairs. Clang! My heart jumped up as my foot slid something metal across the floor. I looked down to see an empty pet dish of some kind. "Oh, don't worry about that." Dan picked up the dish off the floor for me. "That's our cat Evie's dish." I nodded, but he didn't respond. I just climbed the stairs to the top floor. The creaks of the steps were eerie and loud as I made my way up to a dim, badly lit hallway. I couldn't quite collect any thoughts. There was something strange going on here, but I didn't know what. Why were they sending me up here to meet their daughter? Why couldn't they retrieve her for me? Why did I accept their request? Upon checking out the long hallway, I noticed one door at the end. It was bedazzled with stickers and letters, appearing to be a normal young girl's room. The letters spelled out Jessica's name, except the S next to the E was missing. I also noticed there appeared to be no light coming from within the bedroom. I was taking mental notes of everything for my report. I opted for knocking on the door out of respect, but received no reply. After 3 or 4 tries, I decided to just open up the door, as I figured they were wrong about which room she was in. The door slowly creaked open under the grip of my left hand. My other hand clutched my clipboard, perhaps tighter than I should have. Just as I expected, the room was dark. Only a small amount of moonlight shined in from the cool autumn night. I found a switch on the wall to my right and clicked it on. Holy hell. My heart skipped a beat as what I saw in the center of the room was unexpected. A little girl with dark brown hair sat cross-legged on the bed smiling at me, and I didn't notice her before with the lights off. I was startled, but I couldn't be stirred. I'm sorry, Jessica. I didn't think anyone was in here. Hi, is all she said, still smiling at me. Hi. I'm here talking with your parents, and they told me you'd be up here. I just need to ask you a few questions. Is that okay, Jessica? Is this like a game? She asked. The smile never left her face. The problem is, what seemed like a happy smile at first suddenly seemed a little off. I'm not sure what the feeling was that I was getting, but I was starting to get unnerved again. Not exactly, no, but it'll only take a few moments. She just stared at me, her big off-kilter smile never changing. I moved toward the dresser across from her bed and pulled out my pen. Jessica, how are you feeling? Hungry. I blinked a couple times. Hungry. Okay. Didn't you have dinner yet? It's pretty late right now. I had dinner. I feed myself. I blinked at her again. They don't feed you? Okay. I eat whenever I want. That smile on her face sent chills down my back, but much cooler than the air outside. Cleared my throat a little. Do you like your parents? I asked. I used to. She dipped her head down a bit, looking at me with her neck arched. Still with that same grin on her face. Jessica, I need to get the full story here so I can make sure that we find out what's going on, okay? If you're honest, I can help you. Never budging her grin, Jessica nodded. Where are your brother and sister today? She didn't reply. I noticed the cat jump up on the bed and lay by the post. He was staring at Jessica intently. You like your cat? Jessica grinned wider now, and her eyes suddenly flashed with mischief. Then she tilted her head to the side and spoke, but not in her own voice. His voice was deeper, gravelly. I'm hungry. And that's when she snatched up the cat from the bed. Pulled its neck to her mouth, she crunched down, causing the poor thing to hiss and screech. I gasped, I fell back against the dresser. Jessica tilted her head back and gave the most maniacal laugh I've heard in my life. Blood was dripping from her teeth and lips. She looked at the cat. She took the cat in both hands now. Blood spattered under the bed, then I heard a snapping sound that was silent. Jessica flopped down onto her stomach and continued to bite into the cat's fur. Flash, and I could hear her lips and teeth smacking and crunching, and that's when I puked. And I puked all over the floor. I think I may have puked 2 or 3 times before I lunged for the doorway. Colliding with the opposite wall just outside, I stumbled and stomped my way downstairs to where Dan and Valerie were sitting. They both just looked at me, obviously knowing that I had witnessed what they were acting so strange about. I looked at them both. Not one of us saying a word for the longest time. Finally, as I began making my way to the door, Valerie spoke. "Wait!" she exclaimed. I turned around, hand on the front doorknob, fear still present in my watering eyes. And Valerie looked at me with the saddest eyes, gripping her husband's arm so tight, and said, "Is she going to help us?" The Man Under the Willow Tree is a story by Stranger Gamers, and a huge thank you to him for his support on Patreon. There he is, sitting under the willow tree as he always does. Ever since my mom disappeared, my father has been eccentric. Since I was a boy, he would laugh and play with me like a brother instead of a father. He could make games out of basically anything we could find. But when it came time that I needed a dad, he'd be off doing his own thing. Got to a point when I was becoming more of an adult that I realized that he remained a child. Nothing changed with him. That's when he lost me as a friend, and he gained a roommate. I never knew everything about that man. But what I do know is that he was capable of being an adult, just chose to be a kid. Once he lost his friend, he was always off doing something in his office. Though whenever I would go near his quote-unquote work, he would punish me. He'd send me to my room. It never stopped me from trying, of course. I wanted to know what he did. I had to know. But he was always off doing God knows what, and leave me with a sitter. I would concoct some wacky plan to get free and get to my dad, but every time I came close, it was as if he knew I was coming. Another door slammed in my face. I gave up trying when I hit 16. It just seemed fruitless, to say the least. Then, the other day went by. He was sitting under that damn tree again. I had to know what he kept doing in that room, and this was my only chance. He fell asleep under the tree. I opened the door as quietly as I could, as if he would somehow hear it from outside. My footsteps creaked as I walked into the room. A sharp pain struck the back of my neck. Crack! My vision went blurry and I couldn't make out what I was seeing. I thought I saw a woman. The figure almost reminded me of my mother. I couldn't tell. It sped out of the room faster than my vision could come back. My body shaking, I stumbled to the chair and I rested up against it. Beakers. I wondered as I noticed beakers and test tubes all around the room. What the fuck has my dad been up to? Starting to feel better, I heard a voice in the doorway. It exclaimed, "I'll get you for this!" I turned to see a creature like something out of my nightmares. It stared at me. Slowly, step by step, it moved. The dark shadow followed it, as if clinging to its very essence. I was backed up into a corner when I saw my reflection in a mirror in front of me. I looked like him. My father, I thought to myself. The creature must be confused. It must have thought that I was my dad. I'm not who you think I am. I'm just some curious idiot that should have left well enough alone. There was a sound like deep breathing. Only like one constant inhale from the lungs of a smoker. The monster just kept getting closer and closer. I didn't know what to do. He wouldn't listen to me. A piece of the willow tree was sitting next to the mirror. I picked it up and I aimed it at the beast like a dagger. The beast stopped. So did the noise. The creature growled at me as it opened up its chest like wings wrapped around a body, and I saw something that looked like a beak out of its chest. The monster started to scream out of the beak. "Where did you get that?" I was terrified. I couldn't reply at the sight of this creature. I felt this sudden courage, and in a concerned voice I screamed back, "It's not mine, it's my dad's!" I saw something string out of him like blood as he started to shrink. Scared out of my life, I grabbed the willow dagger as hard as I could. Nothing could take it from me. The creature let out a shriek like it was in pain. It sent chills down my spine, so terrible that I froze in fear. I started to feel like I was killing a part of myself. Guilt-ridden, I dropped the dagger to my feet. I had a sudden urge to reach out to the creature and help it. I reached towards the creature, and it just sat there looking at me confused. It felt like I belonged here in that moment. There was a quick sound like wind beginning to enter the room. "Son, you okay?" A voice bellowed from the entryway of the house. Footsteps could be heard approaching the room. They sounded like my father's footsteps. But it was like he was limping. My father stood at the doorway. The expression on his face was faded, like he was badly injured. He looked at the dagger and he yelled at me to grab it. Not knowing what to do, I grabbed it as fast as possible. The creature was furious as it started at my dad. "You are the one we want!" the creature bellowed. I squeezed the dagger as hard as I could and stood to my feet, which was surprisingly hard to do. I was about to charge the creature when I noticed that it stopped dead in its tracks. It began squealing in pain like a banshee. The guilt returned to my body, this time worse than before. It felt like I was killing a close friend, and my dad jolted towards me, grabbing the dagger and thrusting it into the beast. In an instant, the most indescribable thing started happening to the creature. It began to vanish into the dagger as if it had been black sludge being sucked up by some kind of vacuum, and after only a few seconds, the only thing left of the monster was its ominous shadow. The shadow scurried out of the room, as if it had been still attached to a body. My dad screamed at me to run to the willow tree. Without a second thought, I did just that. I had never run with such purpose, and yet I had no idea why I was even running. I got to the willow tree, and it looked different, as if it was dying. I looked behind me to check on my father's pace, but he was nowhere to be seen. I couldn't even see him at all. "Dad?" I yelled for him. There was no answer. The ground beneath me was beginning to shake. Shadow after shadow was racing after me, trying to beat me to the tree. So I did the only thing I could think of and embraced the tree. I felt something pull me closer to the center of it. Not on my body, but on my essence. I gave into the feeling, but not out of weakness, because I felt like home. Like I belonged there. I could see something in the tree. A woman. She looked dead, but somehow still active. I heard a voice from behind me, and it sounded like it was coming from the shadows. It sounded almost female. "Let me in." Something told me not to listen, that it was just a trap, so I grabbed harder. "Let me in!" The voice was a command this time, and it sounded demonic. "Never!" I yelled at the top of my lungs. The woman in the tree began to open her eyes as I yelled, almost like I had awoken her from a long rest. And that's when I saw it. She wasn't just some woman. That was my mom's dead corpse. Light began to pour out of her like she was possessed by an angel. She opened her mouth, letting more light shine through, and began to stand up. The tree was expanding around her as if to give her room. Light was emanating from every pore of her body, and even I was just forced off the tree. The ground below me was covered in the shadows of creatures that I had only seen in my nightmares, and I realized that they were trying to possess my mother. Before she could regain some form of consciousness, I screamed at them like an animal under attack, and to my surprise, they stopped. I turned to look at the tree, but it was gone. The only thing that remained was my mother. She was just standing with a glare in her eyes at the shadows. She looked as powerful as a god. She lifted a hand, and a wave of light came out, wiping out the darkness and the shadows along with it. Then she just fell, looking normal like she did the day she went missing. She opened her eyes again. This time she looked confused. "Noah? Is that you, hon?" "No. Mom, it's me, Brian. Your son." To be continued on the Stranger Gamers channel. Hey there, everyone who's listening on YouTube, or those of you who are listening on the podcast. It's me, Mr. CreepyPasta, and before you head out for the night, I just wanted to let you know about a couple of things. Without you, the show doesn't take place. So, if you guys would like to support the show, or if you guys would like to get your hands on a couple of cool little things whenever new things come out, check out patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta, and any support that you guys show, I really appreciate. For everyone who's already donated to the Patreon, I really appreciate it. You guys are amazing. I thank you so much for that. If you guys are looking for more Creepypasta Storytime, there's a new video that's uploaded to this channel or uploaded to the podcast every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday now. You can be able to get more from me at facebook.com/MrCreepyPasta or on Twitter at MrCreepyPasta and then the number 0. Thanks so much for listening, kids, and for your support. And sweet dreams.